Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, African governments line up to slam Pretoria for the recent wave of xenophobic violence that's left at least 7 dead in Johannesburg and Pretoria. South African businesses have suffered reprisal attacks abroad. And we take a look at the serious consequences to family planning efforts in Kenya of the US's cut to federal funding of international NGOs that provide abortion counselling or referrals. And Ivorian civil servants struggle to pay back astronomical interest owed to loan sharks. Public sector workers are some of the most likely to borrow from the informal sector because of their stable wages. But first, the diplomatic fallout from xenophobic looting in South Africa continued to escalate on Wednesday. Countries across the continent have warned their citizens over violence that has seen foreigners living in Johannesburg and Pretoria targeted. At least 7 people have been killed since last Friday. Nigeria is hit back by boycotting the World Economic Forum that's currently being held in Cape Town. Nigerian celebrities like Tiwa Savage and Burna Boy have said that they'll boycott South Africa, and several governments have called on Pretoria to do more to end the riots. South African business, meanwhile, elsewhere on the continent, have been targeted in tit-for-tat attacks. James Vazina has more.
Burning tyres and hurling rocks, Nigerian protesters seek vengeance on South African-owned shops. Authorities across the continent have called for Pretoria to take action following the recent string of xenophobic attacks. Ghana, Kenya and Ethiopia are urging South Africa to ensure their citizens' safety abroad, while the Nigerian government has advised nationals not to travel to the country until the situation is under control. Over in Zambia, as politics spread to football, the country cancelled a friendly set to take place against South Africa. Protesters also took to the streets as many South African businesses remained closed.
Xenophobia. We already got our independence. It's time that we fight these South Africans. It's time xenophobia come to an end.
Let us uplift the spirit of Pan-Africanism and we want to keep an African cannot keep an African. So students in Zambia have condemned this and we are going to demonstrate to the latter.
Xenophobic violence is on the rise as unemployment has soared. And while 29% of South Africans are without a job, the country remains a major destination for economic migrants.
Hundreds of people taking to the streets protesting against the levels of violence against women in South Africa tried to storm the conference centre hosting the World Economic Forum in Cape Town on Wednesday. Demonstrators say that the country is facing a femicide epidemic. The rally was prompted by the rape and murder last month of a Cape Town University student at a post office and the fatal shooting last Friday of a 25-year-old female boxer. Now, South Africa has one of the highest murder rates in the world. The rate of femicide is about 5 times the global average. Pope Francis touched down in Mozambique on Wednesday at the start of a 3-day tour of the continent. President Filipe Nyusi met the pontiff at Maputo airport, and tens of thousands of cheering people lined the streets as his motorcade made its way into the city. Now, Francis is expected to talk about the country's efforts to consolidate peace. Mozambique emerged from 15 years of civil war in 1992, but the ruling Frelimo party and the opposition Renamo only signed a permanent ceasefire deal last month. The Pope's also due to head to Madagascar and Mauritius during his week-long trip. Now, 2 years ago, Donald Trump's government once more cut US federal funding for NGOs that provide abortion counselling or referrals. That has had serious consequences for women across the globe. This report from Kenya.
In this Nairobi slum, the effects of a policy decision made thousands of kilometers away are hitting people hard. Funds that used to provide safe abortions for women have dried up, and clinics that used to offer adequate health care are now empty.
So before the cut of funds, this place used to be full because most of the clients used to get the services for free. Even these consultation rooms, they used to have doctors, but they're no longer there because of the cut of funds.
The global gag rule was first implemented under Republican President Ronald Reagan in 1984. Since then, U.S. federal funding for NGOs providing abortions and sex education has been cut under each Republican president and reinstated under each Democratic president. And that has led to some dramatic consequences. Hundreds of women have had to rely on quack doctors to perform abortions in unsafe and unsanitary conditions. Mercy is one of the lucky ones.
I went to the quack doctor, who I was introduced with my friend, and he gave me medicine for only 1,000 shillings. It was bleeding a lot. I could not bear it. I almost died.
And it's not only abortions. Funding for sex education and contraception has also been cut.
If women are not able to access contraceptives, then what that means is they'll have unplanned pregnancies, and then what that means is they'll seek abortion services. So if the policymakers think that having it in place, it will reduce the number of abortions, no, it will actually increase the number of abortions.
Research has shown that the number of abortions increased by around 40% when a Republican president was in power in the U.S. 7 women die every day in Kenya as a result of an unsafe abortion.
Across much of Africa, loans and credit can be hard to come by for most people. And so many turn to informal lenders whose repayments can be crippling. In Ivory Coast, public sector workers are some of the most likely to borrow from loan sharks, as their incomes, although modest, are stable and can serve as guarantees. Many, though, are unable to pay back their debts and are left destitute. Our correspondent sent us this report.
For the last 6 months, this teacher has been skipping classes. Instead of teaching in his village school, he spends his days trying to find ways to survive.
I have to travel into Abidjan to see people in person to borrow money for my family to get by.
It all started in 2009. He fell ill, and his salary was suspended for several months, and he began borrowing from loan sharks.
The way I saw the situation was me taking just a few loans to see me through a particular situation, and in a year or two I'd be back on top, but it never ended, and I don't understand.
He's now deeply mired in debt. Half of his monthly salary is redirected at source by the state to repay his lenders. The rest is then taken by the bank to pay off a bank loan. He says he lost 2 children at a young age, as he was unable to meet their medical fees. This teacher is far from alone. 1 in 4 of the country's teachers have fallen prey to unscrupulous lenders. Public sector workers who earn modest but guaranteed salaries transferred to their bank accounts have become the lenders' preferred targets. Plateau, the business district of Ivory Coast's main city, Abidjan, is the loan sharks' main hunting ground. We mic'd up a member of an NGO which fights against the debt traps set for public workers and trailed him on a search for a loan. Within moments, he'd been offered 100,000 francs, around 150 euros.
Si je prends 100 000 francs, comme les gars vont me prendre, c'est ça mon problème.
C'est pas dans le même temps. 50%, hein. C'est-à-dire que si tu prends 60%, il faut le relever de compte bancaire.
D'accord.
C'est tout. Et puis la carte.
D'accord.
Sickness, funerals, weddings. In times of need, lenders can provide a loan in minutes, in exchange for the borrower's bank card and PIN. It's a condition of the lenders for ensuring payback, because in some cases, the sharks help themselves to the salary when it comes in. If repayments aren't made, the debts mount. While usury itself can be punished with 2 years in prison, there are no fixed terms for the loans, which can go on indefinitely.
Well, 2 years ago, the Kingdom of Lesotho became the first African country to greenlight the cultivation of medical marijuana. The hope was that the industry would boost jobs, but the cost of licenses has ended up edging out most locals. Take a look.
Medical marijuana, a $150 billion global industry, and the small landlocked Kingdom of Lesotho is hoping to get its share of the so-called green gold rush. It became the first African country to legalize the cultivation of medical cannabis in 2017, prompting companies like Medigro to set up shop just outside the capital, Maseru. Government support and great weather for growing weed makes the Mountain Kingdom ideal for this business.
I think Lesotho is great in the sense that it's very untouched. So the air you breathe here is clean. The mountain air is amazing. You have streams and water here in abundance, which is clean. And so the conditions are favorable for growing cannabis, definitely.
In a country with a struggling economy, medical cannabis is seen as a way to boost employment and revenue. But a license to trade legally costs about $33,000, a price small-scale farmers just can't afford. Matiba Tamai, a fruit farmer outside Maseru, wishes he could benefit from the booming cannabis market.
Most of the people have been living from marijuana, but illegally. So we were hoping that this will be an opportunity for them to farm it legally now and try to improve their lives. So if they don't get that opportunity because of finance, I think it's a little bit not fair for the people.
In a country where marijuana has always been traditionally cultivated, many are still forced to smuggle it across the border into South Africa.
It is a dangerous activity, but my children survive because of this. They can have clothes and food, but I can die from smuggling.
The UN estimates that the illegal trafficking of cannabis is the third largest form of income in Lesotho over the last decade. But at this stage, legislation prioritizes foreign companies, largely excluding the local farmers from an industry expected to be worth around $270 billion in less than 10 years.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.